Hi, everybody. This is the progress report for this Wednesday, November 9th, the day after one of the most important midterm elections most of us
in our lifetime.
In our lifetime.
Until the next one.
Well, I really think this was an enormously important election.
Agreed. We worked it hard, Bob. We put on
hard.
show upon show upon show.
And by the way, folks, you may think this show is nothing but politics. And election season, that's pretty much it. But the election season over, and after tonight's show, where we have a great guest to chew over the election results and talk about what it all means. We will go back to doing some other things about life in Manchester, culture, history.
Season of giving coming right up around the corner.
Season of giving, and what life in Manchester is like, what it could be like with guests like some of our favorites, John Clayton, maybe Peter Ramsey from the past. We'll go on that thing again. We're not. We know life is more than just elections and politics.
But this was the most important midterm election in our lifetime, Bob. We had to focus on it.
We did, and we certainly did, and
it was fun too.
It was fun,
and we informed people.
And we informed people.
We take it seriously.
Yeah.
We don't just stomp our feet and scream and yell, although I do that once in a while.
Yeah.
But we try to have good guests who are smarter than us and inform folks with them. I'll speak for myself, smarter than me. I don't mean to drag you in on that one, Bob. Sorry about that.
All right, Mike. I think this was a monumentally important election, and we're going to get to our guest very soon. It's June Triscianni, who just about a year ago, became the number one vote getter in the municipal elections, and for aldermanic posts, becoming the one
Rookie
of two
All-Star.
Alderman-At-Large, the top vote getter in the city in that for aldermanic races. And then she had a dramatic race this time, which we're going to get to. It was to become a state senator, and we'll get to that. It was kind of an interesting way that she got into the race, and an amazing result, but we will get to that. But I did want to talk a little bit about what I think was the overall significance of what happened yesterday.
I'm calling it the greatest goal line stand in political history.
Well, I looked this up, Mike. I was thinking, this has a lot in common with the year 2010, which was a midterm election. Barack Obama had been elected just 2 years before. Everybody knows that typically in a mid-year in the president's first term, the president's going to lose support on Capitol Hill, both in the Senate and the House. And President Barack Obama, need I remind you, passed something that they used to call Obamacare. They're not calling it that much anymore. It was the Affordable Care Act. It provided health insurance to millions of Americans that had never had it before.
And still does.
And still does. But it outraged the Republicans. It outraged them. And somehow they got most of the American public to agree with them that it was a bad idea. And they say, this is a bad deal, use phrases like socialized medicine and blah, blah, blah.
Death panels, remember the
death panels, and they got them. And there was the Tea Party election, too, that group. And so they came out ferociously, and I looked it up. In 2010, and by the way, they'd had another year when they had a census so they could gerrymander things to benefit themselves. That was another time they did that. All those factors, they ended up electing 63 more Republicans to the 435-member U.S. House of Representatives than they'd had before the election. 63.
The president called it a shellacking, remember?
Barack Obama, never at a loss for a good phrase.
63 is a shellacking.
Was it a shellacking or a thumping? I don't remember. But whatever it was, he acknowledged it was very painful. And it was way beyond what you usually have as a loss to the president in power in a midterm in his first term.
The average is 23.
There you go. That was a nice little statistic there.
I'm
looking at 2022, which we had yesterday. And I'm looking at it. We got the inflation. We've got President Obama's, unfortunately, very low approval ratings. We've got the
President
fact
Biden.
For Biden. Thank you.
Shifting gears.
Yeah. I meant to distinguish these two.
Fast
not
forward,
that way. But in any
years.
event, and we're all looking forward with dread as the idea that there's going to be a red wave and it's going to crash down on us and it's going to affect everything from our federal candidates, of whom we had one senator running, of course, Maggie Hassan, 2 congresspeople, as we always do, and every member of the New Hampshire House and Senate up for election, and the Executive Council. And can this be like that? People were real upset about the inflation. There's no doubt about it. It's hurting, and they were real unhappy. Many of them, I think not rightly, but that's the way it is, with the performance of President Biden at this point in his first term. Probably his last term, too, but I don't want to talk about that.
He just said he's running.
Yeah, I know, he has to say that. But in any event, it didn't happen, Mike. It didn't happen. And I think a big part of it was, thanks to the efforts of people like Matt Wilhelm, who's been our guest before, Steve Marchand, who's been our guest, and our guest tonight, June Triscianni, we fielded a terrific group of candidates. And these candidates make a difference.
I can't argue with you. Certainly the quality of the candidates has been a
quality
major
of the
issue
candidates was a difference.
nationally and locally, no doubt about it.
So
good candidates, good ground game, good organization.
So we get to the point where this election is mostly over. There's still more voting counting to do. There's going to be recounts.
We don't even know who's going to control the New Hampshire State House yet.
And we don't know who's going to control the U.S. Congress, I guess, entirely.
Not yet.
But where we were expecting maybe a 30-seat swing in favor of the Republicans, if they get the majority, it's going to be by just a handful of votes, 3, maybe 5. And, with that kind of thing, with a House of 435 members, if you only got a majority of 2 or 3, you ain't going to get that much done.
Well, they weren't planning on getting anything done anyway.
No, but they were going to do a lot of damage along the way. They're going
to do that anyway.
Investigation after investigation.
That they will do.
And maybe an impeachment of Biden. They're going to do all that.
So what? Investigate. Find out how great he is.
So, to me, the biggest news out of last night was, and you could feel it in President Biden's comments this afternoon, he's feeling really good. He thought the worst could happen. It didn't happen. And the other thing I'd just like to say before we get on is I spent the whole day as a selectman in Ward 12. And for some reason, they make you run for that job. I can't understand why you should have to run for a job where everybody else other than the selectman is a volunteer. But there I was, getting up early enough to see the freaking eclipse of the moon, which I would not have ordinarily done, but I guess that's a job benefit. See the eclipse of the moon, heading to my bowling place, getting there at 5 o'clock, setting the place up, being there, and watching the votes roll in. And it was and this was true throughout the city, and June, you'll talk about a tremendous turnout. Mm-hmm. Particularly in the morning hours, you line up at the start of when we opened the polls. It's 6 in the morning. There was a line out there, and I don't think they were all there to see the eclipse. We had that, and then it tapered off a little bit around noontime, and then about 4:35, the evening rush came on, and it was tremendous, and it was young people. Yeah. Young people.
I know.
I was so excited to see these young people.
A lot of people with little kids coming in,
people
registering.
With kids.
And the table to register to vote, at least in Ward 8, when I went, which was right around that time after work.
Yeah.
The line to the table to register to vote, and the number of people working right there was much bigger, even than the long lines. There were long lines to line up and get your ballot to vote. So
yeah.
There were a lot of people.
I suppose you did too. We had a greeter who had to. You want to register? A lot of people said yes. Well, this is the line. You register,
which I think was a great idea, because I can tell you from experience, there have been times when you're stuck in the wrong line and you waste 15, 20 minutes only to be told go over there. And it was really great that they had a couple people actually at Ward 8 out, getting people as they came in the door, directing them in the right direction.
Anyway, it was just.
I do have a beef with how they broke up the voting lists, though. I know they had A to B, C to E, F G H I J K L, and then S and T.
What do they have?
I don't know what the problem was.
What do they have? Farley in the wrong lane. What's their problem?
But there were empty lanes and my lane, and it happens, and they were handwritten, so you could tell that they were like breaking them up in response to the crowds. But by the time I get there, it was a little bit out of balance.
Yeah.
But they put everybody through, and that is a hard. Bob, I've done that job, working at the polls all day, and then the night never ends because you have to tally and retally and seal everything and sign this and count the empty ballots and make sure everything goes back. It's a process that is ironclad.
Let me just tell folks about this. These people that work at these polls, and there's Republicans and there's Democrats. The moderator in our ward is very Republican. I can't stand her yard sign she has out. But but she does the job, and it's a tough job. Believe me, it's a tough job.
Oh, yeah.
And we have these voting machines. And as soon as the
vote
polls close,
tabulators, they're not really voting machines.
Okay,
we have paper ballots in the hand.
any event, the polls close, and she goes over and opens the computer up and gets out the tape, and you have the results. Bang! 10 minutes. 10 minutes. We had the results of every race in Ward 12, and they were not close. They were not that close. Good results, from my point of view. And then we have 69 hand count votes. And that's a combination of votes that the machine doesn't accept because somebody made a mistake with their ballot, and it gets put in the hand count. And there are certain people, including one of our ward workers, who said, I don't trust that machine. I want a hand count on my vote. There were a few others. Now, you have the results, and you announce them to people at, 8, 10, 7, 10, whatever it is, 7:15, within minutes. And then you've got 4 hours to go through the hand counts, race by race by race. And it's just bonkers. And the idea that people want us to not use these machines and have hand counts, I can only thank God that the people urging that didn't convince many people to do it, or I might be still there trying to count votes with my fellows.
They have audited and re-audited. And they're doing random audits now. I don't know. I think we were fine. All of these added things are just weirdness that we don't need, in my opinion. I think we've been doing great elections my whole lifetime.
The biggest problem at Ward 12 was we ran out of I vote stickers, and people were annoyed.
Oh, they ran out in Ward 8 at 11 o'clock in the morning. Give me a break. Buy more.
And nobody had any more. I said, let's go raid some from Ward 1.
You need the sticker, or you didn't vote.
People wanted that sticker. But as I said to people, I said, well, at least we didn't run out of ballots, so that's good.
That's happened before, too.
Well, has it? Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's happened in Ward 8. We had to call for ballots. They have more. But they bring them down from the clerk's office.
I think it's time to have our guest to be a participant here and talk about her sense of the election and the results that were achieved. Our guest is June Triscianni, who's been our guest before. If you don't know, I mentioned June's success in the municipal elections last year, where she topped the ticket. And this year, she wasn't, I think, planning to run for state senate until the Democrats failed to field a candidate before the primary. And then the Republicans had an interesting thing happen. They had a primary contest between a state rep from Goffstown named Barbara Griffin and another gentleman.
Gerrymandered that seat just for her own bad self.
She was in charge of gerrymandering. I'm not sure she gerrymandered her own seat, but she gerrymandered the congressional seats for sure. And that came afoul of even Governor Sununu. And then the fellow who beat her in the primary, a gentleman from Hooksett, came into health issues and had to drop out of the race shortly after winning the primary handily. And yet the Republicans did not choose to replace him with the woman who contested with him for the opportunity to run for that seat.
Republicans are nasty.
And instead they recruited a guy here in Manchester named Keith Murphy. Murphy's Tap Room, I'm sure everybody knows that. And June stepped into the breach. Got way more than the number of write-in votes she needed to be on the ballot. That's only 35. How many did you get?
661.
661.
That's enough
Very
to win a state rep race.
And then, as the campaign got on, she got into it rather late because of this circumstance. Mm-hmm. But she did, as she's done in the past, a full court press, left nothing on the table, campaigned vigorously throughout the Senate district. And Senate District 16, I believe, and surprised a lot of people with the fact that she made this into a real race.
Missed it by that much.
Yep.
And so, welcome, June. And now
congratulations.
Now we want to turn it over to you. Get your thoughts on your race and the way things look for you generally here in New Hampshire.
Yeah, what did you see out there? I mean, you're someone who actually goes in campaigns. I'm sure you shook 1,000 and more than that hands. What did you see out there?
Yeah, I mean, we knocked about, I think we haven't gotten the final number, but I think we knocked about 2,500 doors in 8 weeks. We hit the ground running. We made this, I mean, this was serious. You guys know me. I don't do anything halfway. So if we were going to be in this,
you wouldn't have started at all.
We were all in, or I wouldn't have signed up to be on the ballot. We met so many new people. So the towns, for people that may not be familiar, it's Ward 1 in Manchester, which I know very well, my home ward. Candia, Raymond, Hooksett, and Goffstown. So we spent a lot of time in the different communities, and what we found across all of them, which is, it's nice. I mean, I know the city. It's Alderman-At-Large. I do know what's happening, born and raised here, know what's always happened in Manchester, but I think being in these other communities, we're all fighting with the same issues. And on the doors, as much as people don't want to hear it, and I think we proved it a lot yesterday, on the doors, abortion was still a very big issue.
Yeah, I think that turned out to be very true.
Yes.
Exit polls showed it as number one in some areas. I mean, it's a big country, but
and I know people, thought that maybe we were tired to hear of it. As a woman, we're not going to get tired. We're not going to get over it. And I think that showed.
I think you actually said that yourself, that you were getting some fatigue about hearing the ads again and again and again.
Yeah, but we also had, it was men. I knocked on several doors, and I will tell you, I did leave one door, and it just really surprised me because I wasn't expecting. My lists were very much persuasion lists, which means they're not, they're not your diehard, I wouldn't have had you two on my list. You were going to vote Dem. We knew you were going to vote for me.
Yep.
You would have been reached out to on a GOTB list or another way. So mine were those people that
good use of assets.
Maybe don't go out and vote all the time, or maybe need a little persuasion to get them over the line. They're undeclared, not sure where they're going to go. So I kind of didn't know what I was getting on some of the doors. And one gentleman kind of stopped me really quick. I thought it was going to go a different direction. And he looked right at me and said, "My wife and I always vote Republican. We won't be doing that anymore. What happened with Roe v. Wade was unconscionable, and we can't do that. And we will be voting all Dems this time out."
Did you find people on the other side that said, "I can't vote for you because I agree with the reversal of Roe v. Wade"?
So interestingly enough, I had one person that I spoke to in Raymond, as a matter of fact, and once we kind of talked through what the abortion ban really meant, and the fact that, a woman who, God forbid, has a problem at, 5.5 months, and it's her life or the child's life, with a ban in place, that creates a real challenge. And there's a strong possibility that that woman's going to die. And once we kind of, came to common ground and talked about it, people started to come around to understand the position we were coming from. I mean, honestly, I couldn't tell you whether I would ever have an abortion. Thank God I'm not in that position or age group that I have to worry about that. But for someone that needs to be an option. That needs to be a choice.
And the decision has to rest
with the person. Nobody else can make that decision for you, and it's not easy.
You mentioned earlier when you were talking about it that it also comes from men.
Yes.
I've often said men really have no business making a decision on the issue of abortion. We do not live that.
Right.
But I've also, since this Roe v. Wade being overturned, I've considered men have wives and daughters.
Yes.
And daughters.
And mothers and sisters. And they, although not being a woman, they experience a lot of what a woman's life is like. And they care about them.
And you can
I am not
support
surprised
women.
that men would be able to come around and actively use that as a major issue. I'm not surprised at that at all.
It was great, and you're right. It was other people on the doors that it's one gentleman was voting because he has a 12-year-old daughter. So it's it makes a difference, and you're right. It is your friends, and it's putting yourself in a decision where if you ever have to make that decision, the choice and option has to be there. We cannot, we can't ban it, and this should not be, I'm tired of. It's the state's decision. No, it's the woman's decision. Period.
Yeah.
And we need to codify that, and we need to work on that.
Did you experience any people talking about just the knife edge that our democracy was wobbling on? I've heard from just watching the recaps that in certain exit polls that was maybe a second issue. It might not have been the driving issue, but it might have helped decide which direction to go.
Right.
And I don't know if you heard that. I know that in my talking with people before the elections, it came up a lot, but I wasn't knocking on doors. I was
Right.
talking to people that have a different perspective.
I think that's what it is. I think those of us that live, eat, and breathe politics, I think that's probably more of that discussion. The other issue I got a lot of was more of people just worried about, how are they going to pay their heating and electric bills this winter.
It's going to be a big problem.
And, property taxes are still skyrocketing. Fortunately, I was able to help a few people with passing along information from Southern New Hampshire Services, so that they had the number. We ended up kind of at one point just having the flyer with us.
Isn't it funny that often happens while campaigning? You'll run into someone that actually has a real problem, and you can fix it right there, or at least get back to them by the afternoon. It's funny. I've experienced that too, knocking on doors, where you actually have a chance to make a difference on the spot.
Right, and it surprises me that we just don't do a good enough job of getting this information out to people. And I think people feel that, and I don't remember the income limits offhand, but I think some people feel like, oh, I would never qualify for that. And I think a lot of people
if you're having trouble with your heat, yes, you do.
You will qualify. I think that's
there's going to be a lot of need for that help this winter.
Well, and they botched the federal request. I mean, I don't know what went wrong there. They're really not talking about that.
No.
And God bless our federal delegation. They're going to try to fix it, but even in their statement, it was like there might have been some missteps. What happened? Why wasn't that an election issue for the CEO of the state?
Right, and we can't let that happen. And let's face it, with the reality, Republicans have been in power for how long, and they've done nothing to help us with energy or help these situations.
That is a huge issue between everywhere, but between Tom Sherman and Chris Sununu. That's a huge issue. I don't think the public really got the message on that in a way that was as effective as it might have been, but that's an absolutely huge issue. Governor Sununu thinks the way to deal with high energy prices is one-time something back to electric consumers, and Tom Sherman believes, as I believe, and I'm sure you do too, that the way to help your energy consumer.
They're calling to say, "Hey, Bob, you're talking about electricity again."
That was my sister in
mine's
Maine.
off.
He always does. Everything's about electricity. With your hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Well, it's not just electricity; it's diesel and propane.
Understood. But when you have
and on that too, the real good answer is more energy efficiency.
Yes.
Get your home weatherized. Maybe get a heat pump, but at least get your home weatherized, That's the way you can help people with their energy costs, not just electricity.
But I'm going to steer us back, Bob. We're talking about elections right now, okay? We can do an energy show around Christmas time or something.
This is part of the reason I'm sorry the election didn't go better for Tom Sherman. I think if he'd been able to, he did have a good position on that, but I don't think it was articulated.
I don't think that was probably issue 10 on people's list of issues driving
Well,
into
wait
the
a couple
poll.
of months, and if it was then, it would be different. But go ahead. I'll let you proceed.
It probably was part of the inflation issue.
Yes.
And certainly inflation is a thing. But I also, again, people aren't stupid. People understand inflation's going on in Europe. Inflation is worldwide.
Yeah.
And by the way, when's the last time a president's been able to do anything about inflation? Remember Nixon? You probably don't. But do you remember Nixon, the wage price controls?
I do.
Where no raises, no nothing,
Yeah.
Is that what you want?
A Republican president tried to impose
Is that what you guys
wage
want?
and price controls.
Come on.
People forgot that.
Most of
That's
our
true.
viewers probably don't even remember that. That was back in the early 70s, but I remember it, people couldn't get raises. Now they just pamper the big companies so much that people just don't get raises anyway.
I think, but interestingly enough, so you do end up when you're out canvassing, and must be the weird girl because I love canvassing. There is
It's a good
nothing
thing.
Yeah.
for me, knocking on doors and talking to people. That just, if I could do that for like the whole campaign and let everybody worry about everything else, that would be my happy place.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
that's a good place
Just
to be.
knocking
Yeah.
and talking to people. But
I would
that's
think that
how-
would be a good strategy.
It's how you learn what is really bothering people, and it's a
How
really.
do you get people to talk to you? Most of the
So-
time when I was canvassing, people just, wanted to, I say, hi, I'm running for this, any questions? And they would usually just say no, and, it would be very short.
Well,
Please-
that's why
please
your
vote for me.
approach is terrible, Bob. What you want to do
I
is
think-
engage them.
But it's interesting though, because I think that
You ask them
this
questions.
is where being a woman at the door, I think, is a little bit different.
Yeah, probably.
I think it's a little bit less maybe threatening in some cases. And when you knock that door where maybe one person in the household is on the list who's, the not declared but leaning Dem, and then the other person might be a solid Republican, that person answers the door and you're having that conversation. And my favorite question, and I would say 95% of the time I get an answer, but my question is, what is something or one thing that is pushing you out to vote this time? What's that one issue that's bothering you? And some people...
that's a question you ask pretty much every time?
Yeah, I ask everybody on the door. And it's fascinating because I did have one gentleman who said, we had to build that wall. It's like, okay, maybe you have another one. Because, the other difference is trying to get people to understand there's federal issues, and then we're talking state. I'm a state.
What wall do we need here in New Hampshire? What wall is that? Keep out Quebec?
And my sarcasm, so it took everything to not say the wall between New Hampshire and Massachusetts or Canada. But I asked him for another issue. I was like, can you give me something else? What would be number 2? Surprisingly enough to me anyway, number 2 was, I'm sick and tired of giving out-of-state corporations tax breaks to do business in New Hampshire.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, do you know who's responsible for that? I'm a small business owner. Why should an out-of-state large corporation be getting, taxed at a smaller rate than I am? And in reality, I will pay my taxes. I earn money. I pay my taxes on it. That's part of being in business. And it just kind of flipped the whole conversation with him to realize that, guess what? Here's our common ground. Neither one of us want that because it hurts all of us.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, would this be a good time to ask Brendan to play your video they got for us today?
I think it probably would, Brendan. The video, the little 54-second video, it's under a minute. In my opinion, this really was what was on people's mind before they went to the polls. So let's see if you agree with me on that.
What is politics about? MAGA Republicans believe it is all about chaos, owning the libs, white grievance and anger. That's wrong. Governing is about making our lives better. In just one piece of legislation, Democratic senators took action to lower prescription drug prices, giving Medicare the ability to negotiate with Big Pharma, shifted tax burden from the middle class to the very wealthy, protected our future with the most sweeping climate change action in U.S. history. What do you want? Anger or results?
I think people were thinking about when they went to pull the trigger. What got them out the door and through the line to get the ballot? There may have been some, fire there. Right. But I think what it comes down to is that right there. I think it's a clear contrast. I think it's a great thing for the country because, as we were talking about before the show came on, President Biden is going off now to the G20, and he could have been ripped apart there. But he can swagger in right now because he has recaptured the country from the chaos, at least for now. They're going to keep coming, and we have to be vigilant. They're going to keep coming. And by the way, when we're going to lose, we're going to take a hit. We're probably going to lose the House, may even lose the Senate, maybe not. We may not have a Democratic state house. We may not have a Democratic Senate in New Hampshire. We're probably going to lose, but not without a fight. It was a goal line stand. They had to kick the field goal. They didn't get the touchdown, and I think that that's very, very important. And I think what we need to do is build on this. We have to keep that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even passion. We just have to keep that understanding about doing the right thing. So that's where I was coming from when I picked that video.
I think part of that is right too. Is why does it have to be all about anger and owning people?
Yeah.
Why do we need the vitriol? It just needs to stop. Because ultimately there is some, we can find that common ground. And remember, we used to have, and my favorite thing is speaking to friends who are, I guess what I call the old school Republicans. We could have those conversations. We knew that there were things we would never agree on, and that's okay.
Yep.
It was okay because we could still talk about it, and we could agree that I don't agree
We're
with your
going to put
point.
this down while I eat the turkey leg.
But I understand why you feel that way. I just don't feel the same, and that's okay. I don't have to own you. I don't have to beat
and that's
you
the
into
other
submission.
thing. This idea of ownership. I have never wanted to own a conservative. I don't want one.
You might have to feed them.
I don't want to own you.
The Karen feeding is not good.
You can go do your thing. I have no problem with conservatives existing in the world. It's I guess it's okay. Maybe it provides a little balance when I might be getting out there. You know, but this whole concept of owning the libs and I don't know. I don't understand it. It's not in my bones.
Yeah.
But I guess there are people who that's a thing.
And I think you touched on something else, and I don't know if it's changed since we've been on air, but we're looking at the State House right now, and you had mentioned Matt Wilhelm. Matt has done an amazing job. One thing that we fail a lot of times on the Democratic side is really cultivating the candidates and giving them the support network.
Yep.
I ran my first city-wide race last term. I had no idea what I was doing. And you're just constantly flailing. And, not really didn't have much better idea in this race, but I had a different support network because I had learned. And I think what they did on the House side, which was remarkable, and they did it on the Senate side as well, but Matt created the most amazing support network for those reps, and they worked as teams. And we saw it happen across the city.
Ray Buckley was preaching that back in 2003. You cannot go for bullet votes. You cannot fight against your fellow Democrat running on the ticket. If you run together, you win.
And we talked about
and on
Ward
the
12.
other side, the New York Times Sunday magazine last week had a big article about this whole issue of the National Democrats and how they ignored the state house races for far too long to concentrate on winning the federal offices, and that turned out to be a disastrous
look where
policy.
It left us.
There were states they wouldn't even engage in because they thought they were beyond the pale, and that, thank goodness, is beginning to change.
Well, look what's
It needs
happening
to
in New
change
York
even
State.
Further.
They lost several congressional seats. They kept the governor's office, but
Okay, and let's talk governors. Maura Healey in Massachusetts.
Oh yeah, great job.
That's phenomenal.
She's another candidate, I think, that really enjoys going out and meeting people. I've met her several times. Probably you have too.
Yeah, she's come to Manchester on several
and she
occasions.
has strong New Hampshire roots.
Yes.
She grew up in, I think, Hampton or Hampton Falls and went to Winnicott, I think. And she's been a good attorney general, and so that's really outstanding because Massachusetts are one of the bluest, most democratic states in the country.
But they like
often
having
ends up with the Republicans.
They like having that Republican governor.
Yeah.
They do.
I've never understood it, but I guess that may have been the last gasp of the Massachusetts Republican Party, though, from what I've read.
Yeah.
They ain't got it anymore.
So as we were coming in, you had some indication of where things might stand on the issue of who's going to control the House. I don't think the Senate's in that much doubt, unfortunately, but the House, and you want to tell us about that and where you think things stand, and then tell us a little bit about your own outcome and how you feel about it.
I think, like I said, in the House right now, it's a tie, 198 to 198. So this is going to be crazy. The state did announce it. I think they're going to try to get.
So there's only 4 seats that are still
I think so.
undecided, which can decide this, subject to recounts.
I think there's going to be a lot of recounts. The state has already said there's going to be a lot of recounts. They are, I think the tweet I saw this afternoon was they were going to have they still didn't post anything today. I think tomorrow we're going to have at least a posting of the unofficial results. None of us have official results.
Right.
So they'll post the unofficial tomorrow, I believe. But yeah, watching this 198 to 198 could be crazy because what happens if there's what happens if we have a 200-200 match?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Is that I don't suppose that's
Wheeling
ever happened
and
before.
dealing commences. That's
Matt
what
Wilhelm's
happens.
going to have his hands full.
Yes, he will. Yes, he will.
Wow. Well, we know Matt was going to aspire to be Speaker of the House, which means he's got to get 201 to really have that happen. But with 200, maybe there's a way that could happen too. I don't know.
It's
That's
crazy.
really interesting and absolutely fascinating. And that's an
Wheeling
outstanding
and
result,
dealing.
as it was the U.S. House thing, which looks like it may go narrowly Republican, but nothing like we expected. could happen.
What do you think of the prospect of Democrats floating a moderate Republican for Speaker to throw their weight behind instead of McCarthy? What do you
they
think
did
of
it
that
once
idea?
before. They did it with Doug Scammon.
I'm in New Hampshire. I'm talking about federally.
Oh, federally.
What do you
why
I
not
think that
there
could be
too?
Why not?
Is there such a person? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the question, right? I mean, how deep do you have to dig to find one? You know, who'd be willing to try something like that as well?
Yeah.
It's never out of the realm of possibility, but sadly, I think we've still got extremism that we're fighting.
Yeah.
What do you think about the idea of putting Trump in as Speaker of the House? That's been floated. You don't have to be a member of
You
the
don't have to
chamber.
be a
No,
member?
you do not.
You don't have to be a member of the House.
How
Anybody
did I not
can.
know that?
It's because we don't teach civics enough anymore.
But I did. I had Ronnie Pappas for civics. I thought I knew everything,
As did
but I did
You're right.
not
You
know
had the
that.
best of the best.
Maybe I wasn't paying attention
that one day.
class because
That one day.
one day.
So in your own race, when Steve Marchand was here, he was handicapping your race. He had his so-called PVI index. I don't want to go into it, folks.
Oh, it's a great show, though.
You didn't hear him explain it,
he's
but it
fascinating.
was sort of
Go back and watch it on YouTube.
Based on past election cycles, how much of a deficit would you face on a generic ballot in a particular district? And I think in your district, it was like a 6, something, a 6. And how did it come out?
Actually, I didn't even figure out what the number is, but right now, unofficially, I think I am down 1,861 votes.
Mm-hmm.
So for a red district that was designed to easily hand it to a
Yes.
Republican,
You made a
we
fight in it.
flipped it a little bit, and we fought.
You certainly did.
If I had more time, there's always kind of that, time, resources, and you have to be flexible. And we didn't have more time.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
had the resources. I mean, you said this, and you know how I operate. We put everything out there that we could possibly do.
You certainly did.
We left nothing to chance. My husband and I had this great conversation, and we did this the night before my other past elections too, is when we put our head down the night before Election Day, we know that we've done everything we can do. We're happy with everything we did.
And there's another election just around the corner.
Exactly. And the next day, Election Day for us is literally just a fun day to get together with people. It's kind of a party day.
Yeah.
So it's
Go out
we're
and greet your
bouncing
friends
pole
and
to
supporters
pole.
at
We're
the
seeing
polls
friends and supporters.
Go to a party after the elections.
It's just, it's a long day. Fortunately for us, because we did have to travel to multiple polls, we got a little bit of break from the cold every once in a while.
Wasn't a little chilly, wasn't it?
But it
Especially
also
after the sundown.
Yeah, but it also created a little bit of a challenge because we didn't get to spend as much time at each poll as I would have wanted to. But geographically, we had to, we were in Goffstown, then we were in Hooksett, and then, we got 2 locations in Goffstown. We had Manchester. We had to get to Hooksett. We had to get to Candy on Raymond. And the interesting part is earlier in the day, we were running into traffic issues and getting into the polls.
You bring up a point that I wanted to
Yes, you
highlight.
do.
I had heard, and Brendan, I think we have maybe some photographs here, but for some reason, the town of Derry, which is, I think, the largest town in the state. It's smaller than Salem, but there's about 35,000 people.
I think it's the 4th largest community in the state.
It's a big town. They decided
There we are.
that they were going to consolidate their polling places to one location. And forgive the language on this, but we have a string of Facebook posts from people who were stuck in traffic for inordinate amounts of time.
Mm-hmm.
Traffic stretched for miles. Police and fire were blocking roads. And many people they gave up and decided that they weren't going to vote. Here's a picture. If you look in the rearview mirror there, you can see the traffic. This is people lining up just to get into the parking lot. And this is not the parking lot. This is the street to get to the parking lot. So there can be no doubt that many voters in Derry were not able to cast their vote due to poor planning on the part of Derry.
Wow.
Now in the defense of the people, there were 4 times as many voters who turned out as were expected. So, yes.
But you should be ready for that.
Right.
You have to be ready for that.
You hope that's going to happen.
It's your
you don't want to
job
dread it happening.
to be ready for that.
And I did not run into any of that. The towns that I was in and Manchester were amazing.
And
You
I
know,
don't
it
want
was-
to. You know how
that was
I believe in our voting system. I think we do a great job. I am certainly not trying to spin up anything.
No, but that's a
But that's
problem.
unacceptable, and one has to wonder what was the thought process in consolidating voting places into
Well,
one.
didn't they vote as a town on doing that?
I don't know the answer to that.
I think I saw that somewhere, that sometime probably people said, this is going to save you some money. Well, one voting place.
Yes, that seems
right.
to be-
That's a great idea. And look at this, what happened. You know, you're actually interfering with people's right to vote in a major way when this happens.
So I just wonder. I know that throughout that thread there were a lot of people saying, "Hey, call the hotline, call the hotline," and I do understand that the Attorney General's office did get down to the site and did some things to help alleviate the problem. I don't know specifically what they were, but that doesn't help the person who's gone home.
No.
They're not going to,
They're not gonna come
They're
back.
not going to call you and say, "Hey, we know that you had a problem. Can you come down?"
or
the
they
hall?"
had to go to work. You
Could be
can't
anything.
sit, if
Yeah,
your
or
job,
other
and I
obligations,
think
sure.
I was going to vote on my lunch hour, but I think because Mayor Craig had construction on Queen City Avenue, South Main Street, Vinton Street, I was voter suppressed and had to go after work. So I do have a beef with that.
But I think one of the things that we don't understand, and what's frustrating to me is, okay, polling locations are either 6 to 7 or 7 to 7. Great, we've got the hours. Guess what? Not everybody in our state can make it to vote during those hours.
Those are
And I
yes,
know it's
yeah.
really easy to say, come on, you can do that. No. If you're working multiple jobs trying to support your family, if you have to deal with your kids, kudos to the number of people that we saw in Ward 1 at 6 o'clock. You know, they ran home from work, threw some food in their kids' mouths to get them to eat, and then ran out to vote to get there, before the polls closed at 7.
Yep. That's
And
what
a
it
lot
looked-
of people
that's what it
don't
looked like
have
at
the
Ward 8 as
ability
well.
to do that, and
Yep.
and we will consistently. And I don't understand why we're constantly fighting a no excuse absentee ballot in the state, because that is in itself a form of voter suppression.
I used an absentee ballot. When I was in school in Louisiana, I used an absentee ballot. But since then, I have always voted in person. But with COVID, I used an absentee ballot, and I would not have voted if I had to go
Right.
into a polling
Right.
place at that time. I've changed a little bit. I've been a little bit braver, but at that time, I was terrified.
But you also
So-
have a little bit of flexibility, so you probably had the ability to slip out of work a little
Yes,
bit early to
I-
go and vote, and you had the
I'm-
luxury to do
I certainly
that.
am not among the
And
people
that's
who
right.
who you're talking
But
about.
there's that
where if you
group
don't get to
that-
that second job in time, you could lose it. So I get that. I totally understand that, and I do not understand why we make it so hard.
vote.
And again, it's tradition. I'm going to say it's probably live free or die. That's probably the reason.
Yeah.
But
I
we
don't-
do a lot of funny things in New Hampshire just
Yeah.
because.
I acknowledge there may be some people that have a hard time voting between, most polls are open 6 to 7, some maybe 7 to 8, I don't know, but, in that 13-hour period. But I don't think it's very many. And I'll give you what Bill Gardner said about maybe you've heard it, but...
How cavalier of you. No, I'm serious. I'm very serious. That is amazing, Bob.
I know.
That is amazing. How the people that actually
Well,
show up may be struggling to do it.
Well, they
Come
may
on,
be.
man.
They may be, but if they get there, good. I want actual data on that. I mean, I've talked to people. Well, if it's one person, it's an outrage. No, it's not necessarily an outrage. There's a real cost
I'm
to
outraged.
this. But anyhow, Bill Gardner's argument, and I kind of accepted it, at least for a while. I'm not sure I still do. Was that if it's part of the ceremony of democracy to
Oh, dear
gather in the
Lord.
polling
God.
place.
Live free or die. Just that. I was right. I was right.
But the ceremony of democracy.
I think there's something to
Hooey
it.
and baloney.
And then when I was here
Hooey
with
and baloney.
when I was here with Brad Cook, we talked about
I wish I was
Oregon and other
I
states.
wish I was
you know,
here.
he's chairman of the voter
Yes,
company.
I do.
wish
I
I
know
was here,
Brad.
Bob. You did that just because I couldn't be here. I wanted to be on that show.
Well, you should watch it on YouTube. Thanks.
I didn't
your
want to
daughter.
watch. I had some questions.
Oh, did you
I
watch
think
it?
I get the ceremony, and if someone can make it and wants to do that. So when I was,
you shouldn't have to,
Right.
to-
When
to
I was
cast your
a
vote.
teacher, I taught in Newport, New Hampshire. So I did actually live in Newport for a year. And when I voted in Newport, it was a ceremony. And it was absolutely fabulous. I'm not going to lie, because at the time we voted in the Opera House, and they had the one set of stairs up to the stage where you got your ballot, you filled out your ballot, and then you dropped it in the ballot box, and you went down the stairs and exited, and there were townspeople that would sit in the chairs and clap, and it was great because you would get there. And my first experience with it was absolutely crazy, but it was a lot of fun. Was, June Triscianni is here to vote. So, I go up on stage, I do my ballot. When it goes in that box, the next announcement is June Triscianni has voted, and then all the townspeople are clapping.
Oh, how nice.
And it was a
That's
ceremony,
quaint
but we're
and
talking
wonderful.
very quaint.
Can you
We're
imagine
talking
if they
very
were trying to
small.
do that at Ward 1?
Right, we're in a city of 116,000 people. Our polling places do get overwhelmed. We had a line at 6 a.m. I heard Raymond had a line at 10 to 7 before they even opened their polls at 7. And
Ward 8 had a line.
We had a
ceremony
line,
is
yeah.
great, but you know what's great for ceremony? When everybody has a chance to vote and everybody can participate. And the ceremony is when your voice was heard. And it doesn't have to be a production to let your voice be heard. And I appreciate the old school thought of it. It is quaint, but it just doesn't have to be that way.
Why don't we just go and vote by mail only? Like
Agreed.
certain states do?
Sure.
Agreed. Why not? What's the
No,
problem?
I'm gonna be on the other side of this one.
For what?
Because
Why?
Bill Gardner and
The disgraced
and-
former Secretary of State
and Brad
who
Cook,
loaned his...
when he was here, said the data shows that voting falls off when you do that. It doesn't increase; it falls off. So I'm suspicious of the whole idea that we have a problem with the voting totals
Then
not
we
being
do
what
both.
they should be.
Right.
Solve
so
the
why
problem by
can't
doing
we do
both. Then you do
What's-
both.
What's the harm in doing both?
Yeah.
You
Well,
still get the ceremony.
There's no cost to receiving mail.
I would still go in person.
I'm sorry I used the word ceremony. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it should be a sense of participation in democracy when you gather
Putting that
with your-
stamp on that envelope, dropping it in
Yeah,
the mail,
That's
signing the back of the
participation.
envelope.
That's a very solo thing. When you go to the polls, you have to interact with other people. So
I've never heard
guess I'm
a
a little
bigger
bit on the other
bucket
side.
of hooey in my life. I've never heard
I'm just
anything.
going to sit back and watch you two disagree
Wow,
and just keep lobbing
that's
things
crazy.
in.
No, I think voting
Holy
is. I think
smokes.
democracy is about. I think it's about more than voting. Actually, it's about more than just elections. But that's certainly a key part of it. And I think
So
having,
you're willing to disenfranchise people
yeah.
up
Show,
for a ceremony?
show me the data. How many people are actually disenfranchised?
Again,
That's
if
what
it's one, you're willing to
No,
disenfranchise
yeah.
one
But
person.
what's the harm of having
I
the
guess I'm willing to
option?
disenfranchise, and that one person could find a reason to get an absentee
Wow.
ballot. I can't get to the polls because I have 3 jobs and I can't get there and I can't.
That's
get
not a legitimate excuse.
Oh, sure it is.
No, it is not.
You don't have to specify.
You
the
have
reason
to
you're
say-
unavailable.
you-
just
yes,
say
you
You
do.
do, though. You sign.
You do.
You sign what
And
your
there's 2
legitimate
reasons.
reason
You're not going to
is.
be in the state, or you're ill. Those are the 2 reasons you
And
can
I
vote by
do,
absentee.
and I do remember when I was
Okay, well, I
much
didn't want to
younger.
expand that a little bit.
But when I was much younger, I do remember I had to actually have I believe I had to bring a copy of my itinerary to show that I was flying out of the country
well, they
to
don't
do
make
my
you do that
absentee
anymore.
ballot. Well,
Yeah.
no, but it's just, it shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, who cares why? Who cares? The point is to get the vote. You
Well,
know?
I want to
Have
see.
your
I
vote
want to
tallied.
see the data and how many people don't
Well,
vote.
who are you
'Cause
to
it's-
demand that? Who are you to demand that?
I like data to support any public policy position, not just anecdotes. You're a lawyer. You should have evidence too.
I don't need to. I can take judicial notice that there are people out there who struggle to get to the polls, and if it's easier to do it by mail, which it is, I think that's I don't know that there's any dispute there. Then let's do it. I just you know.
All right, well, we
putting
gotta-
restrictions in
we're-
front of
we're-
voting.
we're
I
gonna-
don't
we're-
even
we're-
want to have
we're-
to show an ID. I think that's a restriction on voting.
Well, I'm more with you on that than I am on making mail-in voting the everyday way to vote.
Topsy is
It doesn't
turvy.
have to be the everyday way. It has to be an option. I still think a lot of people would show up, but I just want to have an option for those people who truly can't, or it truly gives them a hardship in life. And we're disenfranchising young people who have
I don't
crazy
even
jobs,
if
parents.
someone would rather do it that way.
Yeah.
To me, that's a good enough reason. It's voting. Do it. If
Your
there's
s-
37 different ways to
your
do it,
civic
it's
duty
voting.
is
It's
to
the
vote.
greatest thing in the world. Let everybody do it the way they want. It doesn't. I don't understand. No, my way's the right way.
Who would have thought on this day when we are all celebrating a good
a really
I
good
didn't
election
know you were a
day.
vote restrictionist. I didn't realize that about you, Bob. I've been sitting next to you for 13 years.
The the bullet doesn't hit us as we thought it was going to in this election. We're disagreeing about that.
Just winged us in the shoulder.
Yeah. In any event,
someone like something. I'm getting texts all over the place. I can't wait to check them after the show.
I want to talk a little bit about the experience I had in Ward 12, which I'm sure is common to many other wards. And maybe I started on this, but I want to talk about it a little more. As I said, I think I said, did I? I can't remember. That when the polls close and the moderator goes down and opens up the computer and gets the tape out, you have the results in 10 or 15. I did say that, didn't I?
You did.
And then you have to spend hours and hours going over the hand count ballots that some people insist on or otherwise are there because the machines rejected it, usually because of an overvote. And the machine tells you there was an overvote. And we had at our ward people dealing with this. Everybody's fried, everybody's exhausted. You've been there since 5 a.m. And they're having to deal with these tough decisions of determining voter intent. When somebody filled in both bubbles for governor, and they're both the same size. I now know what I should have done when I was at the machine to help voters with that, which I didn't do. So I could have saved a couple people's votes, which I didn't do, but I'll know to do it next time. But anyhow, one of the women that was there is one of these people that thinks that there shouldn't be any machines at all, and it should all be hand count.
Okay, she's entitled to that.
She's she's entitled to that. And we're there. We're all freaking out because it's so late, and we're all tired and getting kind of annoyed with each other. And she's saying, well, I think we should have no machines. Somebody said, well, these machines aren't connected anyway. All they got is an electrical cord, and they just scan the votes. They don't do anything other than that. Well, I don't know anything about the software. I don't know how that was done. And I said, I think we should have these machines just out of here. And I think
she wanted to do that night for the vote count.
Yeah,
yesterday.
Yeah, and well, no, not that night.
And why did she have any say in the matter?
Well, she didn't. Fortunately,
why is this even?
She was just expressing a hope. And one of the ladies, the clerk there, a fine lady, said, well, we're here. We've been doing this for, 2-3 hours already, and we got a long way to go. How much time do you think it would take if every vote was like this, and we had to go through every one of, 3,600 votes? She said, well, we'd have more help. No, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
We barely
It's a
staff
tough job
these
to
things
get
right
volunteers
now.
for.
We would not have more help.
And I'm not going to lie, I have the deepest appreciation for all of you that work polls during the day, because everybody thinks my job is hard. Mine is a cakewalk compared to what you guys do on that day.
On election day.
Just
On
that one
election
day.
day,
That one
it
day
is
is brutal.
crazy.
Before that, it's tougher, but the election day.
But that election day and what poll workers do, and you're right, it is hard to get it. And how do we get young people to step up and help out with that?
Yep.
We've got to do a better job, because every year we're at the 11th hour trying to recruit people.
Yeah.
And every year it's crazy. And thank God Manchester, and in dealing with the other towns that I dealt with, they've been very good at pulling everything together. But in Manchester, we do get results pretty quickly. Sharon in Ward 1 came out and said, you guys, this is looking good. I am confident based on what we have for, overvotes that we've got to count. I am confident that what you're going to get out of the tape is going to be quick, and that's going to be very,
That's it.
very
It's pretty
accurate.
close. It's a pretty close
I'm confident,
assumption,
so
yeah.
I'm going to have you guys out of here by, I think we were done in Ward 1 by 7:30, and it was probably because we were joking around a lot with everybody.
You
didn't have to stay there for hours dealing with the hand counts? Because we
No.
did, and it was really.
Well, we didn't. They were there a little bit
they
later,
did.
but as
Well,
we
I wonder
have,
how
we
they
have
managed
everybody
that.
trying to
You
get
had very
the
few
polls.
hand counts, or how'd you do
They
it?
just had very few hand counts, and the moderator.
Yeah, they always pull the tape first, make
Yeah.
that announcement. The hand counts never have a major impact.
Yeah, and that's the thing. These hand counts would have changed any result at all.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by a vote or two, but not the outcome. No
Right.
outcomes
Right.
would have been changed. And yet there was hour after hour going through trying to decide when somebody puts a check mark in one and fills out a bubble in the other, what's the voter intent? And it just seems ridiculous. In any event, I finally told this woman who said we should just have them all done by hand. I mentioned the Brazilian election.
Ooh.
They had
That's
a
how we're gonna end the
national,
show,
a
with the
national
Brazilian
election,
election.
a national election in Brazil, all done by machine, no paper ballots. Now we had that proposal come here once, and here is a gas. Of course, we got to have paper ballots to do a checkup.
I think that's the
in
trick.
Brazil. They did the whole thing with machines, and the guy in Brazil who was called the Latin American Trump, Bolsonaro,
Bolsonaro.
he did not challenge the result. because the result is the machines are tested, they're reliable, and somebody oversees that election that doesn't put up with any nonsense. And wasn't that interesting? And I mentioned to this woman. She said, "Oh, there was a challenge to that election." I said, "Well, the incumbent who lost didn't, launch an attack on his capital with supporters to overturn it." And so, I'm thinking, maybe that's what we should consider. But that's you guys want to fight with me about.
Then you could vote from home and not even worry about me.
Yeah, no, I totally against.
That's not going to happen.
No, paper ballots, paper ballots, paper ballots. You cannot have electronic voting. I do not.
Well, I was always
will
that opinion,
never-
but the Brazilian thing makes me think there
Well-
may be another way to look at it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
Not going to happen.
It's worth investigating, but
I
I
don't
think
think
it's
it's
a
even
ways
worth
before we
investigating.
would get there.
it's not even worth
Yeah.
investigating. Paper ballots work great.
Yeah.
What we need to do,
But
the
the other-
scanners we've been using, they're about 30, 40 years old. There's going to come a time when you can't get parts, and we're going to need to come up with
I think it's
some-
Ward 11 every election has an issue.
But no, in all seriousness, we should be thinking now, what's the next generation of the visual scanner?
Yeah, well, I'm sure people are thinking about that because I know all machines
This is
have
New Hampshire. You
have
kidding
a-
me? That costs money.
have a certain lifetime,
You want people to think they're going to have to get paid.
Yeah. Well, in any event, I thought that was a provocative thing, and apparently was, since you both jumped on it. Well, all I can say is that I think we pulled off a great election, and I think everybody that participated, candidates and poll workers,
Let's go, Brandon. I think that he gave something to run on. You were talking about 2010. The big legislative victory for Obama was Obamacare, which was reviled because no one understood what it was.
and passed without one single Republican vote.
Okay.
And they ran against it.
What Biden did was a series rescuing people's finances by putting those checks, in the mail. Now there are people. Oh yeah, people at my work. Look at they caused inflation. Did you cash it? You caused inflation.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways. But
I think,
I
we had
think
a-
his policies gave them something to run on. There were the passion issues in the background, and then. I think that to get out the voter turnout is what made the difference.
People were solid. Our candidates were strong. Everybody was out on the ground game, which we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The-
there was some great. I can tell you that I don't even know how many pieces of literature we went through because we had to keep ordering at the 11th hour because they were getting so many volunteers for GOTV knocking.
That's
Really?
fantastic.
that they
That's
kept
the kind
running
of
What a wonderful
out.
thing.
That's
And
the
thank
kind of
God
enthusiasm
for
that we need.
What a
thank God
wonderful
for our
thing, yeah.
printer Keystone Press that could literally turn around in a day at that point.
I
in
tell you,
time.
I must
He
say
was
that-
just-
I don't
50
think that
pounds
happens
of
very
mailings.
often. That's really
It
a
was
good
crazy.
piece of news.
It was crazy.
Wow.
So, big question before we go. Runoff in Georgia without a governor's race. There's no way Herschel Walker can
I don't
win this,
think
is
he
there?
can do it.
Without the governor's race,
But
the
I am going
coattail?
to be making phone calls, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm on
That
that
could
camp.
be
I am
the
volunteering
deciding-
for
that
that
could be the
That's a
deciding
campaign.
good
seat,
point. I
as
hadn't
it
thought
was.
of that. That's a really
With
good
no
point.
coattails,
Yeah,
what does he do without coattails? Because that obviously,
That's a good point, yeah.
to beat that excellent, Democratic candidate, he had to really, he had an operation, and I think Herschel had to have some
Yeah.
benefit from that. And if that's not there, what's that leave him with? Very curious.
That's a good point.
We're out of
Okay,
time.
we're out of time again. Thank you,
June,
joining
awesome
Thank
seeing you.
you.
Thank you for
Thank
running.
you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
doing
running
that.
and running such a vigorous and
Awesome.
energetic campaign. And thank you for serving our city in the way you do.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week. Folks, don't forget, we are on YouTube. You can
Yep.
tell your friends and neighbors.
We need subscribers, folks.
We need subscribers.
We're getting plenty of viewers, but we need subscribers.
Hit
Hit that subscribe
This
button.
show is kicking into a higher degree of availability and effect, I hope. And thanks to Mike's daughter, Megan, who really has been helping us on this.
Yeah, she's pretty good at it.
And she's pretty good at it. And we have much better intros on our Facebook, thanks to Mike and Megan, including you probably like yours. And so we'll see you next week. Probably do something other than talk about elections.
Can't wait. Can't wait. See you later, folks.